Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be looking at the 2022 United States midterm elections in the state of Pennsylvania. Before I start, I'd like to say if you like my content, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you know when we upload, and also leave a like and comment. With that said, let's get into it. So last night, John Fetterman and Dr. Oz had their first and only debate of the cycle, and boy was that a disaster for John Fetterman. As I'm sure everybody knows, John Fetterman has really bad health problems, including a stroke he had earlier this year, which has completely impaired his ability to communicate and talk, and he needed accommodations made by the news station, and they gave those to him. And everyone expected him to kind of struggle going into this debate, but it was so much worse than people expected. So as you can see here, I have a poll here who won the Senate debate, and 83% of people said that Dr. Oz won the Senate debate, which is probably the most lopsided post-debate poll that I have ever seen. I've never seen a candidate really break 70% on one of these polls. The 17% who said John Fetterman won are probably mostly partisans who are voting for him anyway. So I think a very large majority of independents or swing voters who watched this debate thought Dr. Oz won. And there is a reason for that, and that's because of John Fetterman's health problems, he just totally fell apart. And like I said earlier, it was way worse than people were initially expecting. He barely got a sentence out, he stumbled over every word, and it was just a really horrible performance from Fetterman. But honestly, that wasn't the only contributing factor to Dr. Oz winning this debate in a landslide, according to this poll, because I think Dr. Oz was very well composed, and I think that he did a lot better than people thought he was going to do as well. Now, Oz played it smart in this debate. He didn't attack John Fetterman for his health issues, which I think was very smart. I think that would have made him look really bad. Instead, he continuously hammered John Fetterman on the economy and inflation and crime, which are the biggest factors in the Pennsylvania Senate race, the biggest issues this cycle. Of course, there is one big issue that isn't favoring Republicans this cycle, which is abortion. And Dr. Oz gave a pretty decent abortion answer. He said that he thought that it should be up to the states and that abortions are between a woman and their doctor. And a lot of people who support John Fetterman or are just liberal and don't like Dr. Oz are saying that this answer was actually bad because he said that it should be between a mother and doctor and the state and local government, and that the government shouldn't be involved at all. But a lot of swing voters that I've seen in footage after the debates and interviews are saying that Dr. Oz's answer actually made them feel better about voting for him, especially on the issue of abortion. And while Dr. Oz was giving this very good performance on the stage, John Fetterman was just stuttering and taking long pauses, and a lot of the words he did manage to put together didn't really make sense together, and it was honestly just painful to watch. I really just felt bad for him while I was watching. And the Fetterman campaign was in a really bad position here because they knew that if he went on the debate stage, he would do really poorly. And I don't think anyone was expecting it to go as poorly as it did for him, but people knew going in that this was going to be bad. But if he didn't do this, it's been a thing this cycle that people who decide not to debate are kind of getting hammered and their popularity goes down a little bit. We saw in Arizona, Katie Hobbs did not debate Kari Lake. She refused, and a lot of people were like, okay, why is she doing that? Why is she not debating? It just makes candidates look bad. And Herschel Walker skipped the second debate between him and Raphael Warnock, and people criticized him for that too. So if John Fetterman hadn't done this debate, he would have been criticized for that, but he did do it, and he just did not perform well at all. So he was really in a lose-lose situation here. But regardless of whether that was fair or not, Dr. Oz obviously won this debate. The people have spoken in these polls. Dr. Oz is the winner in this debate, according to voters, by a large margin. And I think that this is going to help Dr. Oz a lot. I already thought Dr. Oz was ahead very narrowly, but I think he's probably going to expand that lead because of this debate. Because a lot of people watch this, and a lot of independents probably watch this to figure out who they wanted to vote for. And when the debate performance was that good from Dr. Oz and that bad from John Fetterman, I think this is really going to widen the margin between the two. And truthfully, I think it is possible that this debate handed Republicans the Senate last night, because if you look at the map of the big four toss-up Senate seats, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, Republicans need to win 2 of these seats to regain the Senate. So doing the math here, it looks like Republicans are favored in Nevada, and it looks like Democrats are favored in Arizona, which gives Republicans 50 seats already and Democrats 48. So Democrats would have to win both Pennsylvania and Georgia if Republicans get Nevada and they hold Arizona. Well, the likelihood of Georgia going to a runoff is pretty high, so I am going to leave that one blank here because I think that's going to be decided in December. So it would have been possible that we don't know who has the majority if John Fetterman had won this election. It would be 50-49 going into that runoff. But now I think Dr. Oz is a pretty clear favorite here. Even if it is still a narrow favorite, I think he's pretty clearly favored, even if the polls aren't saying so. But I do think that the polls are going to be saying so soon, because if you look at the average here, John Fetterman is only up 1.3% in these polls. And these polls have closed so much in the last couple weeks. When I made my last video about Pennsylvania a month ago, Fetterman was up by around 4.5 points. Now he's only up by 1.3. And that alone is enough for Oz to be within the margin of error, and he could win even with this lead from Fetterman in the polls anyway. But when you take into account the fact that Fetterman is at 47% and Oz is at 46%, that means roughly 7% of the electorate here is undecided. And undecideds break a lot for Republicans in red wave midterm years. And so Oz is probably going to win a lot of the undecideds, especially after that debate last night. And so I do think Oz is probably going to win by a couple points now. So going back to the Senate map here, if Dr. Oz holds on to Pennsylvania, that means Republicans hold every seat that they currently have in the Senate. So that means that even if Democrats do hold with Mark Kelly in Arizona and Adam Laxalt loses in Nevada, which I think is possible because early voting looks like Nevada might be more favored to Democrats than expected. Even if all of that happens, they could still win in Georgia and get the majority back. Although I do think that if it is 50-49 going into the runoff election, I think Warnock would probably win. Although it's way too early to say that because I think it mostly depends on who gets the most votes in the first round in Georgia. But the main point here is that Republicans winning in Pennsylvania and Dr. Oz winning over John Fetterman would make them very heavy favorites for the Senate, I think, because I think they are very narrowly favored in Nevada. And I think Georgia, Herschel Walker's probably going to lead in the first round. And if Republicans have the majority going into the runoff election, I think Democrats will be demoralized. I think Walker would win. So there was a lot to talk about for the Senate election in Pennsylvania, but there is some more updates on the governor's election, and that is that the polls are kind of closing in the governor's election right now. When I made my video on Pennsylvania last month, Shapiro was up by almost 10 points, and then he did cross 10 points. At his peak, he was up by almost 12 points, and just in the last 2 weeks, this race has narrowed to a Shapiro plus 6.4 lead on Real Clear Politics. It's also important to note that Shapiro was at around 52% in his vote share percentage, but now he's down to 48.7%. And so if undecideds do break for Mastriano, he could win this election. I don't really see the discrepancy between Oz and Mastriano being more than 6 points. So if Oz does manage to win by a huge margin over Fetterman, I could see Mastriano pulling ahead of Shapiro just because of that alone. And I doubt that Oz is going to win by 6 points. I think he's probably going to win by 2 to 3 right now. But it is possible that Mastriano does better than expected, especially if polls are underestimating Western Pennsylvania like they did in the primary. If we go down to Real Clear Politics' adjusted polling average in Pennsylvania, which I've mentioned before, I do have a problem with the way that they do their adjusted polling. But it does only have Shapiro up 3.6 points. And that is totally within the margin of error. It's especially within the margin of error in Pennsylvania where there's huge polling misses all the time. I do think that it's possible that Mastriano wins, although I do still think this is a lean Democrat race. I did have it as likely Democrat in my last prediction, but I do think Mastriano is probably going to close in on Shapiro a little bit going up to the election. I think Shapiro is probably going to win by around 3 points right now, or somewhere between 3 and 4. And that's all I really have to say about Pennsylvania and its Senate and governor races this year for now. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe and comment telling me what you think. Thank you guys for watching and have a great day.